This week, I'm speaking with Karen Wickre, author of Taking the Work Out of Networking, An Introvert's Guide to Making Connections That Count. And we're going to talk about networking in this post-pandemic world. Cue the music.
Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast, brought to you by Career Pivot. This podcast is where those of us in the second half of life come together to discuss how to repurpose our careers for the 21st century. Come listen to career experts give you proven strategies. Listen to people like you tell their stories on how they repurpose their careers. And finally, get your questions answered. Your host, Mark Miller, has made 6 career pivots over the last 30 years. He understands this is not about jumping out of the frying pan into a fire, but rather to create a plan where you make clear, actionable steps or pivots to a better future career. Are you ready to repurpose your career?
Welcome to episode 261 of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. My name is Mark Miller, and I'll be your host every Monday for discussion on what it's like to repurpose your career. This week, I'm speaking with Karen Wickre, author of Taking the Work Out of Networking, An Introvert's Guide to Making Connections That Count. We're going to talk about networking in this new post-pandemic world. I had Karen on the podcast way back in February of 2019 in episode 114, and that episode was called An Introvert's Guide to Making Connections That Count. But first, let me read you her bio. Karen is a veteran connector, editor, and communicator, and has worked in and around Silicon Valley long enough to appear in Wired 1.4. Even before that, she wrote one of the very first guides to what used to be called the World Wide Web, and now it's just an amusing relic of more innocent times. As a corporate writer, she develops stories, styles, cadence for Google, Twitter, and many startups. As an early Googler, she joined when there were 500 employees. She left 9 years later when there were 50,000. She has been in a fair share of war rooms and fire drills and have crafted scores of posts covering products and pivots, shakeups, corporate apologies, and company culture. More recently, she advised a range of companies that want a strategy or a reality check on their messages and the content they produce. Sometimes friends introduce her as someone who knows everybody. Of course, that's not true, but usually she does know who everyone is. That may be her secret power along with common sense. She can see around corners, ask questions that matter, all in order to help get to the next steps and real solutions for teams, companies, and individuals. It appears that in-person events are coming back. I am scheduled to speak at Texpo, the Treasury and Financial Conference in Austin, Texas in late April. South by Southwest kicks off before this episode will publish. I thought this would be a good time to discuss networking in this new world, as I expect many of you are out of practice and have a bit of anxiety about getting back out there. I know I do. However, before we get to the episode, let's have a word for our sponsor, Career Pivot. The Career Pivot membership community continues to help the members who are participating in this project grow and thrive. This community where everyone is there to help everyone else out, figure out what they want to do in the second half of life, and then make it happen. Let's hear what Greg had to say about being part of the community.
Joined the community when I was in the midst of a career transition. And what I needed unbiased input and support and observations from folks who'd present me with their point of view that would help me figure out what I'd like to do next. And I didn't want to do it with people who lived around me or past professional colleagues. So that's where Mark and the community have been really instrumental. Is I've got a built-in support network who will be genuine, honest, and supportive.
I'm recruiting new members. If you are interested in learning more about the endeavor, please go to careerpivot.com/community. Now, on to my discussion with Karen Wickre. Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast. I have the real joy of having my friend Karen Wickre, who I had on the podcast back in February of 2019, pre-pandemic, and she is the author of Taking the Work Out of Networking, your guide to making and keeping great connections. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's fun to be back, Mark.
Actually, I reached out to Karen, over a year ago, and my email got stuck in her junk folder or whatever. And she reached back out to me to introduce me to somebody else to be on the podcast. And I said, hey, we need to talk about networking because, well, I know for me, when I've tried to go out and network, initially I sucked at it because I was out of practice. So, Karen, we're supposedly moving from pandemic to endemic, or whatever that means. How should people be approaching getting back out and networking?
The first phrase that comes to mind is baby steps, because it's kind of overwhelming. I haven't talked to anyone yet well, first of all, there are not that many big events or even returns to office that are so widespread yet, right? And so we've probably been meeting people we're close to for a walk and talk, or maybe an outdoor coffee or something like that. So that's good practice. Those are baby steps with people you don't know. And I would say we are out of practice in terms of kind of social exchanges. There's a kind that we've experienced with video that I think is useful, but with video, we're probably more over-indexing on I'm talking and then I'm waiting for the other person to finish talking and then I'll talk again. There's a little bit of, because it's really hard on video to, talk over each other or have a sort of more animated exchange, especially with more than one person. It's really impossible. So anyway, all of which is to say, what we've been doing in terms of connecting with people has been necessary to do the way we've been doing it. And now we have to sort of take steps. For example, the idea of me having a dinner party for 6 or 8 people is like a bridge too far right now. I can't think about that. I can think about, let me meet you outside somewhere for coffee or a walk. Maybe it's 2 people, but the idea of more than that at the moment seems daunting. And I think similarly, being back in an office, and I have been in a couple of offices that have started, all the fully vaxxed people can go in for a day a week for a lunch or something. And everybody's a little rusty at this. So part of it is just going to be practice. As you might say, you have to build up that muscle again.
Yeah, we were talking before we got on about kind of thinking before you go meet somebody about how you're going to do this.
Yeah.
What if before you're going to talk to somebody, what kind of things should you be thinking about?
Well, it's beyond your friends. I'll leave that to everybody individually to do that. But if it's a professionally related or a new volunteer situation or something like that, pause to think, what am I trying to get out of this meeting or session? Is there a specific thing, or is it more of a get to know you? If in the case of wanting some kind of information, maybe it's not strictly transactional, but you want there to be a point to it, just to pause and sort of collect your thoughts and say, let me, regroup here, who this person is, how this meeting came about, and, what our sort of common interest is, or the thing that brought us together. I mean, I do that because I've worked a long time at home. I kind of do that before each meeting anyway. Let me look at my calendar. Do I have to prepare? Do I have to, it's that same kind of exercise. I find that the sort of virtualness that we have, even with to make small talk, someone will say, what have you been binge watching? And I have to stop and think, because I've been doing a lot of it over the time. And so I want to have an answer. I don't just want to say, oh, let me think. I don't know. I can't remember. You want to put a little more yourself in. So you have to kind of organize your brain before you go in.
Yeah. After a year, I guess May of 2021, I went back to Austin and had all these coffee meetings and found I really sucked. My active listening skills had deteriorated. So I actually went back and read some articles on active listening, right? On going, okay, maybe I should repeat and paraphrase what they said. Maybe I need to start looking at questions that I want to ask. Looking at the active listening skills that I had flat forgotten, just simply learning how to be interested in them rather than me talking about myself.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think we are out of practice for that, and also attention. Anything more than an hour now seems like a lot, maybe, which is why I have avoided the idea of a dinner party yet. But it's sort of like a coffee date, or we have a 50-minute hour for a meeting or whatever it is. And you think, okay, I can handle that. But when we're kind of on our own, the joy of a sort of serendipitous conversation that meanders, I think some of us may be out of practice with that, because we're kind of thinking, what am I doing here? And then what am I doing next? And, we're just much more either lost in a fog, but also like, what's next on my list, kind of task oriented at the same time. It's kind of jarring, actually.
What strategies can you recommend for someone who hasn't been networking for 2 years? As you say, take baby steps to get back into it.
Yeah. Well, as I say, the beauty, if there is any, in the pandemic, is the opportunity to reach out to someone and say, hey, I've been thinking about you, or I'm just emerging from the fog, or I want to be back in touch, and I want to know how you are and how it's all been for you, and where have you been? Because I now routinely ask that when I'm on a call with someone, because people are all over the place, not in their usual setting necessarily. But it is an opportunity to just, everybody wants to say, well, this is what I've been doing, and I've quit my job. I've done something new. I'm learning a new skill. Something is different. And so even for people you don't know well, that's a great kind of conversation starter. Where have you been, and what have you been doing? And I find I have kept that up over the last couple of years, simply with email and occasional private messages to people who I'm not necessarily always in touch with, but just to say, hey, I just thought of you, and like, where are you in all this, and what's going on with you? So I have kept in touch with some, but if you're only starting now, that's a perfectly good, as we emerge, right, as we come out of our shells, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to catch up with you and trade stories on what's going on. And if you have a specific thing, and I have a specific, question or thing I want to talk to you about. The other thing I would say is I now have sort of a menu of, do you want to have coffee in person at an outdoor place? Can we make a convenient time for Zoom? Are you sick of Zoom? Shall we have a phone call? Et cetera. Sort of like, there's a lot of options. And so when I'm reaching out, I stress that I'm not over asking for an in-person thing if they don't want to do that. Or obviously if they're not nearby, then it's, what, and by the way, what's your preferred platform for talking, right?
Yeah, it's understanding, it's explicitly asking what is their comfort level.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you can go say, okay, as you say, do you want to meet outside? Do you want to, because when I was again back in Austin last May, I specifically picked a place that was outdoors,
yes,
that I could walk to, that everyone could get to. The weather was nice, so it made it easy. And in fact, the coffee shop didn't even let you walk inside. So
Right. Right.
It was very easy in a very, very comfortable environment.
For people that are local to each other.
Yeah.
A big thing now that lots of people are doing. I have a dog, so I'm often walking the dog. But a big thing now is can we meet for a walk? Because that's going to be outdoors, and that can be, in a nice neighborhood or in a park with dogs or without, But that's become a much more sort of common thing. Do you want to take a walk or have coffee? That seems to be sort of the two of the defaults that I'm seeing a lot.
Yeah, one of the things I've learned to do is to self-observe myself as I get out and meet people, and suddenly, am I talking too much? Just observing myself.
That's good practice anyway, to be self-aware. But yeah, as we're rusty at it, I think did I tell you that story? Like, there's still a kind of fog about the last couple of years. So did you already know this? Where did we leave off? And, I find I do that, I do that a lot, sort of like, where were we before this interruption? But also, gauging yourself, because we're not used to sort of these kinds of exchanges so much.
I mean, right now, I'm scheduled to speak in front of a live audience at the end of April and back in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of going, I have not spoken in front of an audience since October of 2019. And I'm going to be inside with 500 other people. Right now, that causes me a little bit of anxiety.
Those speaking dates in April too, as a matter of fact. In person. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm trying to, I'm just listening to myself going, okay, how am I going to handle this? I'm not going to make decisions until I probably get there in April, because we all know, last July, I went to a July 4th party inside.
Mm-hmm.
We were all vaccinated and we thought we were free.
Yeah.
By Labor Day, we had gone through some whiplash, right? Yeah. So I've learned not to predict where we'll be in April.
Yeah.
If someone is uncomfortable, what strategies or what do you recommend people do?
You mean going to an in-person event?
Yes.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, masks are one thing that I hope people feel like they can be comfortable wearing, even if lots of other people aren't.
Yep.
And I've seen, even the other night, the State of the Union address, I noticed there were some people who were in masks, and it seemed maybe the cameras were on them and everybody was sort of behaving, but it seemed like you have your reasons for wearing a mask, and these other people feel they don't. That's okay. But the more you're clear with the organizers of the event ahead of time, also what's the expectation, what's the behavior, what's the norm in this place, and then think about what your own, no, I'm not comfortable, I don't know, sitting at the banquet table, but I'm happy to, be at a podium or, whatever it is.
Quick interruption. If you are enjoying this podcast, please rate it and review it on whatever podcast player you are using. And more importantly, would you mind telling a friend? Thanks, and back to the podcast episode. I have a good friend back in Austin who was running an event in December, and they're actually going to hold it at Alamo Draft House inside. And they were at that time trying to figure out, how do they COVID test everybody? That's one of the things I'm now going to ask the organizer, what's your plans?
Yeah. Yeah.
For no other reason than it will alleviate my own anxiety.
For sure. And that should be a proactive thing on the event organizer's side, I think, to say, by the way, everyone who's attending is fully vaxxed or, we'll be masked, or we have a video option for those who, don't want to come, or whatever it is.
Well, for me, it's just a matter of just being my own self-awareness of my own anxiety levels. And I joke, I rarely ever get sick. I don't know that I've ever had the flu, and I've never had a flu shot. I get sick every 10 years, whether I need to or not.
Right. Right.
But that still doesn't stop me from, we've been programmed for the last 2 years. I'm 65 years old. I'm not a spring chicken, although I'm in better health now than I've been in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
But still, that doesn't alleviate my own anxiety.
Yeah, that's right. And then now's the time to speak up. I mean, there's more, I think, more of a green light to kind of speak up about one's own preferences than maybe there was before this.
Well, I know that a number of events that I've heard about where they've given people an option to put on their badge. Mm-hmm. Green says you can come up and hug me.
Right.
Yellow says keep your distance.
Yeah.
And red says I'm going to be masked. I'm going to socially distance.
Yeah.
If you want, I'll fist bump you.
That's right.
Which brings up another interesting point is, okay, you're meeting somebody and they put their hand out to shake your hands.
Yeah.
And I've reached the point where I don't shake hands anymore. I just fist bump.
Right. And I feel like self-aware people will understand, either, are we doing this? Are we shaking hands, or what's your preference? Yeah. You have a little exchange in the moment. Yeah, I don't have a hard and fast rule about it, but I appreciate that people are expressing uncertainty together, right? That's a good way to go. And then, like, you know what? Let's just hit the elbows all the day.
Well, it'll be interesting to see whether we ever go back to regularly shaking hands.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people wash their hands a lot more than they used to.
I get nagged by my Apple Watch all the time that I have not made the full 20 seconds. And so I keep the water on and I keep watching. Now, now can I stop?
I'm not quite that much of a nerd that I have my Apple Watch. I don't have an Apple Watch. So anyway, so what other strategies? I'll use an example. I again was talking to my buddy Tom Singer some time ago, and he talked about first schedule individual meetings with people that you trust. Do it outside.
Yep.
Then maybe schedule a little group get together, again with people and trust, where you are controlling the environment. And then you feel comfortable enough to actually go to somebody else's group gathering.
Those are good. I think that's a good sequence.
To just get over and also just simply practicing these human interactions.
Social discourse. Yeah. Where there's a lot of forgiveness.
The other thing I notice is having been a public speaker for so many years and being a trainer, and I was a geek that could speak for IBM for many years, and I found my ability to read body language, because when we're here on Zoom, like I'm sitting here looking at Karen right now, I can see her face and the top of her body, but I can't see, hand expressions. Right.
You're usually tapping my leg.
Right.
You won't know.
Right. And so I'm a lot more conscious of, okay, I need to pay attention to body language. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. I mean, we all should. And video makes it harder. If I'm like this with my kind of crossed arms up at my shoulders, you might sense that something's amiss. But it is good practice to get back together when getting back together, to understand, that's for you, it might be your 10th time seeing people in person, but for someone else, it might be their first, and so to kind of understand that context and to keep asking, I find an ongoing topic of conversation with people is a list of things they haven't done or aren't ready to do yet, right? Like go to a movie, get on a plane, take a long trip versus a short trip, et cetera. And so even that, I think it all gives us some context and understanding that we should then make use of, to kind of see where people are. But I agree with you about reading body language, and also we probably don't know how to gauge keeping social distance in person as much as we used to, right? Because I doubt I hope nobody is thinking about getting too close just because there's a strange creature that's just a few feet away. But keeping respectful distance, even in person, is something to pay attention to, I think, for a while. My fear, though, is we're all Americans in particular have such short-term memories. We're all going to forget about this in a year, and then there'll be some other pandemic, down the line.
How do you think networking will change going forward? We've learned to network differently. And so what do you think we will carry forward, and what do you think we'll dispose of?
Well, I think the idea of the video call is with us, right? And that has proven to be pretty wonderful for seeing people that you haven't seen in a while, for having familiarity of a sort. No, it's not the same as in person, but it's still, even now, I'm not working full time, so I don't have to worry about my poor friends who do, are on Zoom calls all day, every day, which is exhausting. But for me, if I have a choice, I will say I'd rather see you and talk to you on video than just have a phone call, or a chat, because there's some element to it. And I think we've seen, by the way, it can be very efficient. The idea of even, running across town for a half-hour meeting or a non-essential coffee date, when it could be, let's do this online quickly. It's much more efficient, and obviously helps people who are long distance and can't get together. So I feel like that will stay, and I think that's a good thing. It's more that, and being in touch with people, as I say, the last couple of years, I've been in touch with people I haven't seen for years, who are sort of part of my broader network, right? Former colleagues. And it's been very nice to have this, hey, can we just catch up? I haven't talked to you in a while. And have that be sort of a more regular part of one's ongoing activity, as opposed to being brought about by a crisis, right? So I hope that does stay, where it's just every so often, I'd love to see you. Can we just, talk for half an hour and see each other? As for the in-person stuff, I think we'll get those muscles back, but it will take a little practice to sort of all be together. I think our human instincts will help us get through being together. But in terms of actual connecting with new people and networking, I think it's easier to have the option of having video and or chat or, Slack or whatever, just as options to sort of either to get acquainted or to ask a specific thing at a specific time, rather than all of the effort that goes into preparing for an in-person thing. Those are good when we can make them work, but we don't need to make them work in order to network.
Yeah, the one thing that's really has cropped up for me is during the pandemic, I've actually become closer to some people who are very remote.
Yes.
For no other reason than I've just simply reached out.
Yep.
And be able to, just schedule a quarterly call, and it's not for any business reasons. It's just how you doing. And I have a good friend out in Oregon who gotten into a bike accident. He slipped on some leaves and broke his pelvis and so he had to relearn to walk. And just reaching back out periodically, just going, how are you doing? And having been in a near fatal bicycle accident, I completely relate to what happened to him. In that way, we've actually become closer. Mm-hmm. In fact, we just had a discussion the other day about, him possibly selling his business as we reach or scaling back. As I think a lot of us, there are a lot of folks who are coming out of this pandemic are going, why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yes. Even those of us who are part-time consultants are questioning that, I have to say.
Well, this has all forced us to reevaluate what's important.
Yep.
And do I scale back? Do I need all the crap I've got? What are the relations I want to keep and which are the relations I want to jettison?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, by the way, an ongoing question. I've noticed for some reason, other outlets may have this, but the New York Times has had a number of stories about giving up, about clearing out your clutter, right? And they're kind of geared to a retirement era audience, but not only. And I think partly this, where you've been living the last couple of years, what you're thinking about has made those kind of questions really come to the fore, and for people too. So in my fantasy, if I declare a day when I'm no longer consulting, I would rapidly eliminate hundreds of people from my LinkedIn, but I'm not sure I will have exactly that day. It might be more that I start blending in other stuff, more of the time, which I'm already beginning to do.
Yeah, I think this is a good time for a reevaluation I use the example, I'm a big fan of the book Necessary Endings. That book got me to leave Austin because it got me thinking about, why am I still here? I was there for 40 years.
Yeah.
Well, my business didn't require me to be there. It wasn't the funky little town it used to be. The traffic had gotten real. The cost of living had gone up a lot. And going, why am I still here? And I couldn't come up with a good reason. And this is the time of getting out and talking to people, because I think we're all reevaluating.
Yeah, indeed.
And that's a good conversation.
It absolutely is. And I found I have a lot of younger friends from all my years in working in tech, and I love them. And I just the other day had a walk and talk with a former colleague. I haven't seen her in years. We've been online talking. And so she's a mom of teenagers, young teenagers, and she has been lives in San Francisco, has been working in Palo Alto, which is a good 35 miles, or on a bad day, and there are many, can be an hour drive. And I said to her, and she of course hasn't been at the office, and I said, what's the plan there? And she said, I am never commuting again. Period. I'm never doing it. And I said, good for you. If you can work that out with them and they don't care, it's a small enough company, great. Good for you. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Frees up so much time.
Well, but it's also refreshing to hear other people say that.
Yeah. It's inspiring.
Yep. Yeah. My brother works for a major tech financial company, and they gave up all their lease space. He's in New Jersey. And he's already told his boss, if you make me go back in the office, I retire. And fortunately, they're not going to do that, at least not because they don't have any place for him to go to.
Right.
And
we'll see 6 months.
Yeah, we'll see in a year.
Yeah.
One of the things I've learned is I can't predict the future.
I'll learn that.
I do not have a crystal ball that works.
Yeah.
I've tried to buy one on Amazon. So
it's out of stock. permanently.
Yes, that's right. So, Karen, this has been really good. If someone wanted to reach out and contact you, how would they do that?
Well, even though I just dissed it, there is LinkedIn. And it was designed for this sort of contact. I'm also on Twitter at KVox. That's KV as in Victor OX. And I'm often there, probably too often there. And then I have a website, just my name, Karen Wickre.
And we'll put those links in the show notes.
All right. Thank you very much. It's great to see you and see you in person. Yes. In real time, I should say.
So with that, thank you very much for being on the Repurpose Your Career podcast.
Thank you again. It's been really fun.
I found my discussion with Karen helpful for myself as I discussed some of my own anxiety about walking into a hotel and speaking in front of a real live crowd again. I plan to have some fun with the environment, and I'm really curious how many in the audience will be wearing masks. I have no idea what to expect. We are entering a new world. Take a moment, go to careerpivot.com, sign up for the weekly Career Pivot Insights newsletter, which is sent out every Sunday. You will get a weekly update on this podcast, white papers, and new blog posts. While there, do not forget to check out the Career Pivot community, which can be found at careerpivot.com/community. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Look for Career Pivot on Facebook and LinkedIn. You'll also find me on Twitter at Career Pivot. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. You will find all the show notes at careerpivot.com/episode-261. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podbeam, Overcast, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and lots of other places where podcasts can be found. This podcast can be found on the Repurpose Your Career podcast channel on YouTube. Hope to see you next Monday for another episode of Repurpose Your Career podcast.